Hi everybody, I'm Nick Lawrence and I'd like to welcome you to the ACE Report video blog here on acereport.org as well as on YouTube. I'm here with Dr. Lou Cuthbert from ACE, the Alliance for a Clean Environment. Lou, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be here. Good to see you.
We have a lot to talk about, and I think
We do.
the big deal is that we've talked about this in other times about how elected officials can play a major role in making things change or preventing things from changing.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Nick, that where we are right now as a community, as a region, people who live within 50 miles of the Limerick nuclear plant, we're really at a crossroads, and it's time for elected officials to stand up and be counted in terms of protection. We've done a lot of programs in the last 10 years or so that have identified the researched evidence that we found of harms. I mean, we're looking at unprecedented threats and harms coming from this particular power plant. And unless we do something about it, it's only going to get worse. So it's time for elected officials to come out of the shadows, so to speak, and leave any fear behind them, because it's time to be counted in or be counted out.
So let's talk about the actually what is at stake, Lou. What's at stake if we do not do something about this nuclear power plant?
Well, I don't think that it's an overstatement, Nick, to say that literally it's all on the line here. We're talking about public health. We're talking about safety. We're talking about financial interests. Let me just go through a short list of some of the major things that are on the table, basically, and at stake. Vital drinking water resources for 2 million people. That's at stake based on what's happening with this nuclear plant. Radioactive air releases that have added to just a horrific pattern of elevated cancers and other related illnesses and diseases. An aging power plant. I know we've said this before, and I compare it to vehicles and even human beings. The older we get, the more maintenance we need, and the more likely things are to start degrading and breaking down.
Exactly.
That's a serious problem at this power plant because of aging, corroding, and increasingly dangerous problems with a whole lot of systems. There is no safe solution for high-level radioactive waste. We've talked about this in some other programs. The longer Limerick operates, the more high-level radioactive waste is produced. That's a serious problem because some of those radionuclides have half-lives of thousands of years and are known to cause cancer and a whole lot of other problems. So there's really no safe solution for that. Evacuation. We've talked about this in the past. There will be no safe, orderly, coordinated evacuation for the 8 million people who live within 50 miles of Limerick in a worst-case scenario. So,
human nature works against the evacuation plan.
Of course.
Right. People are going to do things in what they perceive to be their own best interest at the time when there's a problem like this, right?
That's correct.
And you've seen every disaster movie that's ever been produced. People either stampede, don't listen, and we think that that's just in the movies. It's not that way. People are going to try to take care of themselves in a crisis situation.
Yep, that's human nature. And the people out there who, with a straight face, would tell us as residents that nothing to worry about here. There's a perfectly viable, feasible, operational evacuation plan. Or they're simply lying through their teeth because there's no way. The last big thing that we face is meltdown risks. And there are some science deniers out there in terms of the nuclear industry who would have us believe that 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima were not significant events. Nothing happened. Nothing to see here. Move along. Nobody was harmed. Ignore it. Everything's under control. Trust the NRC because they believe and accept what they hear from the nuclear industry. I mean, it is just absolutely insane to believe that if we do nothing, things are going to get better.
So let's make it clear to our audience. ACE has done a lot to inform elected officials about what's going on. And so my question is, Do they just deny the data that you show them? Is it purely a political decision on their part? Is it because of they think they're going to lose tax revenues or jobs are going to go? What is the reason why they're not responding to empirical data that you guys have?
That's a good question, Nick. And I'm sure the answers are as complex and as numerous as there are elected officials.
Okay.
I mean, some elected officials are much more concerned about campaign contributions than what happens to you, me, or anybody who's watching this blog. Others are concerned more about their next reelection campaign than they are about protecting the people who pay their salaries. There are just a lot of different reasons why people in elected office have chosen not to deal with this. And this isn't just today. I mean, during this blog, we're going to make it clear that, since 1980, elected officials knew how bad the outlook was, and they chose to do nothing about this. Let me just give you a couple of examples. In 2011, elected officials out there failed to speak out on Limerick relicensing at a public hearing. They just chose not to. They didn't have the courage to come out and say, this is a bad idea. We've had plenty here, more than enough. Cease and desist, stop, don't relicense this plant. 0 elected officials showed up, in essence, to talk about that. In 2012, officials failed to speak out on a public record to protect our drinking water. Again, well documented, well researched, lots of evidence, but again, dead silence from state and federal officials. In 2013, we're now talking 3 years in a row,
right,
officials had a third chance, and we presented information in every one of these instances in painful detail, so they knew what was at stake. In 2013, state and federal officials failed to speak out on the record about Limerick's environmental impacts. And there was just an enormous amount of evidence in terms of all the damage and degradation to the air, to the water, to the environment, to the fish, to the vegetation, to the food source, to our children. And again, just mind-numbing silence.
Yeah.
This is not acceptable. Part of our message today in this video blog is, elected officials who stand there with their hands in their pockets and their mouths closed don't deserve your vote. I mean, we're coming up on another election, and part of our, message to elected officials, state and federal, is going to be silence is unacceptable. If you choose to be silent on this issue, you are willing to accept unprecedented threats and harms to 50 million people in 8 miles.
Do we have any public officials that have agreed with what you're doing or willing to act on what you're doing or to talk about the message to others?
Yeah, a precious handful, basically, and it's 2 people who come to mind.
Wow.
Two, small number, Nick. The first is Senator Bob Casey, who has been very strong on challenging, questioning, and pushing on evacuation-related issues. So Bob Casey's had the courage to stand up and speak out on that. The other exception is a local elected official in Chester County. His name is Michael Moyer.
Okay.
He's a township supervisor, and he's spoken out on most of these issues. He's shown the greatest amount of courage of any of the elected officials that we've worked with over the past 18 years or so. We need protection now. We need elected officials to stand up now. That's only going to happen if people who are living in the area, residents, taxpayers, folks who either read our information or see this video blog or go to our website and look at a lot of detailed research over the past 13 years, speak up now. Pick up phones, go to the computer, put pen to paper. What we're suggesting is call, write, or email every elected official in your region. It's literally that important that we're encouraging people to do that.
How important is the voice of an elected official? Have there been instances where, when elected officials have spoken out, that things have changed? Plants have been closed or anything like that?
Absolutely. We seem to be, the last person standing during, Ring Around the Rosie as a community and as a region. California, New York, and Vermont are 3 really good examples, Nick, of what can happen when people stand up, have the courage and demand protection for their people. Let's just take a quick look at those 3 states because, been there, done that is part of the message. California. In California, probably the highest profile person who's been championing the people's cause there is Senator Barbara Boxer. And as a result of her efforts and lots of other people in concert, San Onofre is closing. Okay. California, officials speak, nuclear plant closing. Vermont, probably the highest profile defender there is Senator Bernie Sanders. And again, because of the efforts of Bernie Sanders and a lot of other elected officials in that state, and a lot of really, really involved citizens and activists, Vermont Yankee closing. So those 2 are pretty high profile. There's been a lot of pressure applied in New York, including from Governor Andrew Cuomo, and virtually all the state senators in the state of New York have been pushing for closure of Indian Point. And again, their major premise is, it's right in the middle of a high density population area. There's no way you're going to evacuate safely. Sound familiar? It sounds very much
like our own area, sure.
Yeah. Now, if you want to just do a rollback to what some people think are the good old days, let's roll the clock back to about 1980.
Okay.
And let's think for a minute about what happened there. A lot of evidence was on the table of imminent harms. Not enough water. At that point, twice the number of people that could safely evacuate. Today it's 4 times the number. Elected officials in 1980 stood silent and allowed this plant to be built, Nick.
Even though they knew of the problems surrounding it.
Even though they knew.
Lack of water, let's say, enough water to take care of it.
Absolutely. And that's, past is prologue.
Right.
We had dead silence then. We have dead silence now. The only thing left is either speak up or there are likely to be a whole lot of dead people.
We have about 2 minutes left in this segment, Lou, so I want to make sure we cover the points that you'd like to cover.
The idea, Nick, that it's unthinkable for elected officials to just sit in their offices, close their doors, and close their hearts and their minds to what's happening to people. We're talking about the threat of people living in this area not having safe water to drink, not being able to breathe the air without contracting carcinogenic diseases. So, every day this plant operates, Nick, more pollution in the form of radionuclides and other toxic chemicals go into the air and the water and the food, the fish, the vegetation, and our babies. And that is not acceptable. That is absolutely not acceptable. People need to demand protection. All right, we've reached a point now where people have to demand protection or inform elected officials, we're going to find somebody to replace you. We will vote for someone who will protect us.
So what do you want people to do? Just about a minute and a half or so. What can people do besides watching our video blog, which we hope that you do as often as you can, and tell everyone about it, folks? What can people do, Lou?
Well, they can go to our website. In addition to this blog, which will roll some contact information in considerable detail, they can go to our website, www.acereport.org, and they can see this video blog and then read the research and report that follows supporting it, which then will give them a lot of the detailed information and the specific contact.
How important is it for people when our elected representatives or people are wanting to run are out talking to the people, that we hold their feet to the fire, that somebody raise these issues, that you attend these kinds of talks when they're going to talk about trying to get themselves reelected? Is it important for us to speak out there?
Extremely. The only way that officials are going to be pressured into or encouraged or convinced to take action to protect us is if they hear from us. So every opportunity, if you know that there's an elected official at a town meeting or a community event of some sort, a photo opportunity, which a lot of officials are pretty good at, raise the question.
Okay. Well, Lou, I want to thank you for this particular segment. It's been certainly interesting. I want to encourage all of you who are watching this video blog to continue to watch it over and over again by going to acereport.org. You can check it out there for yourselves. We'll be back with another segment in just a little while.